Okay, good morning and welcome everybody to May's Forensics Committee meeting. And a particularly warm welcome to Derek Scrimminger of Forensics, who is attending his last meeting today. Derek is retiring from his role as Head of Function after 38 years of service in forensics. So congratulations, Derek, on that milestone, and all the very best from the committee and others, I'm sure, on what will hopefully be a long and very happy retirement. Now, we have some apologies today. We have Raymond Brown from PERC and Katharina Casper. She may be able to join us later, but for now she's an apology. And if she's able to join us later, then we'll be delighted to see her. Now, that then moves us on to declarations of interest and connections. Does anyone have any declarations of interest or connection? Not seeing any, so if we can note that. That then moves us on to any other business. Is there anyone that wants to flag up any other business that we can consider later in the meeting? No, I'm not seeing that either. A decision to take items 8 and 9 in private. In accordance with section 20 of the SPA standing orders, can members agree to take agenda items 8 and 9 in private? I'm seeing nods there, so if we can agree that. Then that moves us on to item 2, which is the minutes and actions from the previous meeting. 2.1 is the minute of the Forensics Committee held on the 5th of February, and that is here for approval. Are there any matters of accuracy that anyone's got with that? I think, Mary, you did, because I think you were at that and Fiona wasn't.
Yes, I was. That's right, Chair.
So, Colette, if we can correct that minute, and if we can agree that corrected minute, that would be terrific. That then moves us on to the action log and matters arising. Now, we've got 3 actions proposed for closure. If we could just go through the action log, and we've got 2 actions that are proposed as ongoing. So bear with me. So drug driving, the first one is proposed for closure, and that's to ensure future reports are restructured and detail of end-to-end process of achieving the 6-month statutory time limit. So that's proposed for closure. Drug driving, the second one is to provide updates fortnightly and monthly. I think we don't need that anymore now because that was in between the last meeting and this meeting. So thank you to the director and her team for providing those, so we can close that. Then there is the Forensic Services Change Programme, which is proposed as ongoing, and we'll get to discussing that later in the agenda. Digital Forensics Next Step, that is, well, that's down as, it's not marked as ongoing, but it is ongoing, and we'll look forward to the 6th of the 8th, which is August, to getting something back on that. Then we have the director's report, the one from the 4th of May 2023, which is to ensure it's action FSC 002 in that, which is to ensure that the committee is sight of the post-implementation review of scenes of tasking unit. And I see the update that says this has been delayed in the Police Scotland, a delay in Police Scotland portfolio assistance. So that's not proposed for closure but ongoing. But there is a bit confusion about the expected date of completion. Fiona, do you have an expected date of completion for this?
I would expect that we can present that to the next Forensic Services Committee meeting.
Super.
Final stages of review.
Great, no, that's terrific. So we can get that put down there. So that's ongoing. And then lastly, we have the Forensic Services Strategic Workforce Plan, which is proposed for closure because we've got external services in the process of being procured. Okay, are we content with closing those? Okay, thanks very much. Bear with me, I'm working off one screen and multiple documents, so do bear with me. That then moves us on to decisions since the last meeting, of which there have been none. So we then move on to 3.1, which is the Forensic Services Director's Report, and welcome Fiona Douglas to introduce that. Over to you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. My report sets out a range of areas of progress across forensic services since the last Forensic Services Committee meeting. So I'll just highlight some areas for members and areas in particular where Forensic Services is making change or has made progress. With regards to the budget, we continue to manage our budget carefully to ensure that we can support the continuing implementation of the new operating model. And I know that we have the change paper in the papers for today's meeting, and we can discuss what that plan looks like in terms of the further implementation of the operating model over the financial year. We do have an approved budget of 44 million for revenue and 1 million for capital for this financial year, which allows us to make that consolidation in the operating model. In the papers for today's meeting, we have the updated 2-year Forensic Services business plan, which aligns to delivery of our forensic strategy. This has been updated and we have used a balanced scorecard approach as members had previously requested. And again, we'll have an opportunity later in the meeting to go through the changes in areas of focus and priority in relation to the Forensic Services business plan. I'm delighted to welcome Paul Stewart and also Sam Curran to our senior management team. Paul started just around about 3 weeks ago, and Sam is due to join us in coming few weeks. And I think that will bring some really expert skills into the senior management team, and this fills the 2 vacancies that we hold, one of which of course is in relation to Derek Scrimger's retirement, which the chair's already referred to, but I know that you'll all continue to join me in thanking him for his exceptional service and dedication over so many years working in forensic science. The Q4 performance report is provided to members today to give an update on a range of performance areas across the service. We continue to improve how we report, and we have been working closely with colleagues in SPA Corporate to make sure that we've got a strong performance report that meets committee members' needs. We will be taking a risk-based approach to our performance as we work to roll out the changes to the operating model. With regards to UCAS, it was great to receive such a positive response from UCAS to the work carried out in our criminal toxicology team over the past year. We've also agreed a way forward with UCAS in relation to our compliance with a guidance document called Gen 6, which we will work with Police Scotland and the Crown Office to get in place over the next few months. The drug driving report has been provided to members today, and even with the great progress highlighted by UCAS, there's still some way to go before we have a sustainable model for drug driving in the long term. This financial year, we have outsourcing arrangements in place, and we also have levels of expected demand, which are set out in the specific Memorandum of Understanding in relation to drug driving toxicology services, which has been agreed by the Crown Office and Police Scotland. A significant piece of good news relates to the new roof that we have on our Edinburgh Howden Hall laboratory, which has had a long-standing problem of leaking, and this has now been fixed, thanks really to the excellent work of our contractors and support from Police Scotland Estates. The replacement required far more work than originally had been envisaged, but it was carried out in a way that meant that we could keep the lab open and operational with minimal disruption as could be managed. I am grateful for staff's understanding throughout whilst extensive work was delivered. There's never a good time to replace a roof, but possibly replacing the roof over this very windy, stormy winter that we have had certainly posed a number of challenges, both for the contractors and the estates team and also for our staff. But it's a credit to them that we've continued to deliver operational services uninterrupted from that site as that work has been completed. The National Tasking Unit is no longer new. It has now been a year since it started. We are waiting to receive the news from Portfolio Assurance colleagues, as previously discussed in the Action Register, in Police Scotland about how the work of the unit and the new ways of working in search and recovery scenes have bedded in. The review that was undertaken by the Metropolitan Police Service has praised the work of the unit and the staff that work in our search and recovery scenes area, made a number of suggestions for improvement. We've now set up a short life working group to review these suggestions and to look at how we can build on the work already achieved. So when we present back into the next Forensic Services Committee meeting, we will bring together the outcome of the post-implementation review carried out by Police Scotland Portfolio Assurance in combination with the recommendations made by the Metropolitan Police Service. With regards to the Forensic Services Value Short Life Working Group, I have taken on chairing this committee following the retirement of Jane Ryder, and I'd like to thank the generous support from the Leverhulme Research Centre for Forensic Science, and that we're now able to move ahead with a full-time researcher in the process of being appointed. My report touches on Operation Launchpad. This relates to the brutal murders of Derek Johnston and Desmond Rawlings at a flat in Edinburgh, which was described by family members as the cowardly actions of monsters, and these families will never recover from the impact of these crimes. This case operation highlights very clearly the horrific cases forensic services scientists and staff can find themselves dealing with, and the impact it can have on them, which is why our work on the impact of such trauma is so important. As you can see, it involves scientists from many specialist areas, and this is why it's so important that we consider the welfare of our staff. And finally, with regards to the forensic nurses training, this is part of some long-term work that Carol Rogers has led on supporting the NHS and aligns to the commitment of the SPA to deliver the violence against women and girls strategy. So I'll pause there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks very much for that. Well, firstly, can I also extend the committee's welcome to Paul Stewart and to Sam Curran on joining us, and wish them all the very best in their new roles. I'd also like to say well done in the UCAS accreditation, so very pleased to hear about that. And certainly also thanks to the staff at Howden Hall for managing to continue, because my recollection of this winter was it seemed particularly long, dark and very, very wet. So for keeping the ship going during that while the roof was being repaired, and that continuity has been very, very important to us. And also the aspect relating to Operation Launchpad, because this is what we do as a forensic services, or what you do as a forensic services is, and securing those convictions has been very, very important. So well done to everybody involved in that. And the last thing is the aspect relating to forensic nurse training. I think that's a very welcome initiative. So again, congratulations to the team there for the work that they've done on that. Now, we've got various things sorted through this report that are coming up later, like, for example, drug driving, the change programme. But does any member have any questions on the Director's report at this stage? Or any comments? Caroline?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And you're right. There's a lot that we'll pick up later on in the meeting, but I just wanted to pick up, Fiona, on your report as ever is great and very well laid out. But it was really about Operation Launchpad, and it was really about the impact on staff of dealing with some of these horrific cases, and this was a particularly horrific one. And I just wondered if you could talk us through what that kind of support looks like for staff when they are involved in these kind of horrific cases. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Caroline, and it is so important that we provide that support to our people when they have been exposed to really very serious traumatic incidents, and we do work with colleagues in Police Scotland to offer support post-specific incidents through review and discussion with line managers, as well as specialist support that we can offer through the TRIM process, in line with the same as what police officers would get. Alongside that, though, we have got a psychological supervision pilot, which has just completed its first year of 3 years, and this is where we offer proactive counselling support to our scene attending staff, and that allows us really to identify any early issues or any members of staff that are struggling, so that we can put proactive support in place for them. And I think that that's particularly important in preventing some of the impact that trauma can have. The early feedback from the first year of that pilot has been very positive. So it does need full assessment, and there's a full assessment process, but I think we are starting to see some positive feedback from our people that are involved in that process. So that's particularly important. The new tasking unit also has a part to play in relation to making sure that we take account of multiple exposures to trauma for particular members of staff. So there's an opportunity for us to make sure that the work is spread out as well as it can be across people, so that also individual circumstances and taking into account what's going on in someone's life at any particular point in time can also be factored into tasking decisions.
Some of that sounds absolutely brilliant, and especially the early intervention. That'll be really interesting to see the outcome of that kind of review, because I think if you can get things early, you can prevent a lot of things. So that's brilliant. Well done for all that.
Okay.
Right. Any other questions from members on this? I've got one. I touched on the forensic nurse training. Can I just ask, are there any plans to evaluate that going forward?
We would always, as a matter of course, evaluate the training inputs that we provide. The evaluation that was undertaken on the back of that has been extremely positive in terms of feedback from the nurses that attended those sessions. So again, it's an area we've made a lot of impact on, because it links in with other aspects of support that we provide to the sexual assault referral centres, for example, where we undertake environmental monitoring and also make sure that we are developing jointly advice to forensic nurses and others in relation to medical examinations, particularly around sexual assault and sexual offence cases.
Yeah, thanks. Mary, you had your hand up. Has the moment passed?
Yes, I was going to ask exactly the question you did about the evaluation of this, but also I suppose the question is, will it be rolled out across other nursing courses? Will nurses in other areas have the opportunity to benefit from this training?
I think we need to make that assessment, Mary, in relation to where this adds the most value. It's always a balance in terms of the amount of training inputs that we would like to provide versus what we can accommodate with the staff that we have. So we continue to work really closely with colleagues in the NHS to make sure that we are delivering inputs to them as and where that they would be helpful and make a difference. So it's constantly under review, and we'll offer as much support as we can.
Excellent. So it's a great example of partnership working with the NHS. So well done. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, if we have no more questions or comments on this, I'll move the business then on to where are we? Item 3.2, which is the Forensic Services Performance Report, and we have Vicky Morton who's going to introduce that. So welcome, Vicky, and over to you.
Great, thank you, Chair, and morning, everyone. As Fiona's already mentioned, we've taken the opportunity to work with SPA Corporate to revise the performance report this quarter, and really to look at more strategically alignment of the reporting to other forensic SPA committees. Of course, we always welcome feedback to develop our reporting further. So the report itself considers our balanced scorecard approach to performance, our performance framework, which was approved by the committee, as we know, last year, our people metrics, and then, of course, service delivery. In terms of slide 3 in the executive summary, just want to call out that the new operating model for forensic services has really been many years in the making, and it's not been easy. It's been quite a lengthy process. There's been significant recruitment into new roles, new ways of working have been implemented, and it takes real time to embed all of that. And I really also wanted just to point out that we have to recognise the hard work of course, our people, our staff across forensic services, and also those within Police Scotland who've assisted with this work, particularly P&D, people in development, estates, digital division, procurement, etc. So during this period of significant change in forensic services, we have, in the main, maintained service delivery. The key highlights in this report are that the balanced scorecard delivery is strong. Business plan for the last 2 years, 22 to 24, has progressed well. with priorities obviously being reviewed in line with the next 2-year business plan, which we'll come on to later on in the agenda. People metrics have shown a positive improvement in terms of absence, but I do want to call out at this point that there has been one RIDOR reported incident in Q4. But just to give assurance to everyone on the committee, following investigation, this incident, although it happened in an office location, it was not directly attributable to the working environment, but it did still have to be reported to HSE.
Sorry, can I just stop you there? Can you maybe
course.
explain about RIDOR, please? What it's all about? Just
Yes, of course. So RIDOR is the Reporting of Injuries, Diseases and Dangerous Occurrences regulations, and they're set criteria in terms of if an accident, an incident at work meets certain criteria, it has to be reported to the HSE, the Health and Safety Executive, within a specific time frame. And this is performed by Police Scotland on our behalf. And because this incident itself meant that there was a member of staff off work for a period of time over 7 days, it had to be reported. But it was a really thorough investigation performed, and it was actually it wasn't around, as I said before, attributable to a work activity and the working environment. So there was no issues there.
So how then does that necessitate us reporting if it wasn't related to work?
Because it happened in an actual workplace itself, there's set criteria that Police Scotland must follow in terms of that reporting. Not entirely sure I understand, and why does that then, does one case trigger an amber and more than one presumably a red?
Yes.
Or
is that the severity of it?
Yes, one incident of RIDOR would continue, as you say, to meet that assessment in amber, and that's why we've reported it such in this report. Probably on reflection, because there was no preventative actions identified, there was a thorough investigation. We could have potentially looked at that as green because it was in control. However, just for visibility, I wanted to make sure that it was clear that there had been one RIDOR.
Yeah. Sorry about stopping you there, but do carry on. Thank you.
No worries, thank you. Then the next key highlight from the report is around the delivery against the MOU, which is strong performance for all urgent casework, and that's obviously including scene attendance as well. But there have been, as always, areas for improvement highlighted in the report as well, which will be a main focus for the team. Moving on then to the balanced scorecard, slide 4. If we're looking at the 4 aspects of the balanced scorecard itself, finance are all complete, with internal business processes also in a good position, as well as the majority of the people activities. But there is continued focus on those that have been marked as are assessed as amber, where they have started, but there's issues being managed and monitored closely. And those are around criminal toxicology capacity and demand, which again, we've got a paper later on in the agenda. The strategic workforce planning forecasting activity, which has started, and we've again mentioned that in the action log, and the development of the values and behaviours framework for forensic services. And again, that will be discussed further in the business plan report later. Looking at the business plan slides, slide 5, we're now at the end of that business plan reporting period and in a strong position, with a further 2 activities completed since the last report. And as I've said, we've taken the opportunity to reprioritise and look at what needs to move forward into the next business plan. There is one amber activity area relating to the Forensic Services ICT landscape, and we continue to have positive discussions with Police Scotland Digital Division in this regard. Obviously, this section of the report will look slightly differently in the next Forensic Services Committee as we take into consideration the new business plan. Slides 6 and 7 look at the performance framework, and a performance framework was of course approved last October, and it will be refreshed later this year. Overall, the status is assessed as positive, with the majority of activities assessed as green. There has been a stepped improvement in terms of absence rates, which you can see in slide 6 at the top there, moving from amber to green. But there are two activities assessed as amber. The RIDOR we've already discussed, and then on slide 7, the performance data. Again, we'll come on to that later in the report. So I suppose just to call out here, a number of areas have been highlighted where, although seen and casework demands are being met, the timeliness is not where we want it to be. So overall, assessment against the performance framework provides assurance that the key internal processes to set and deliver and monitor and report on our strategic priorities are effective. But of course, caveat there's always room for continuous improvement. If we then look at slide 8, which considers our people, health and safety, just to call out here that in summary, a robust health and safety culture and management framework are in place within forensic services, is very well embedded, very well established, with engagement with staff, Police Scotland Health and Safety as well, and also our trade union colleagues who attend various meetings that we have across the organisation. Slides 9 and 10 then look at the working days lost, short-term and long-term absence. So there's been a lot of work around this area, as we know, over the last 12 months and more, to be honest, in terms of absence. There has been a significant improvement seen this quarter, with a number of working days lost reducing by 2% since December last year. So we're now at that 4.5% mark, which is below our target of 5%, but obviously we always want to strive for improvement there. 19 people returned, for example, from sick leave during the period, 5 of which were long-term sickness absence. Short-term absences have also seen a reduction, which you can see on the slides there, with the year-to-date average being 2.5% compared with 3.5% the same time last year. In terms of quality compliance, this is summarised in slide 11. As we know, Forensic Services is a highly regulated organisation, lots of internal and external assessments, lots of measures in there to really provide that assurance of the quality of the results that we provide to our partners and the public. Fiona's already mentioned the positive UCAS visits we've had recently there, and also the discussions with really positive discussions with UCAS around Gen 6. And I'm pleased to say that a short life working group has now been established with our partners, which will be reported back to this committee in the future, looking at hopefully the August committee. Positive feedback continues to be provided by our partners, and this quarter we also had some positive feedback from a member of the public in relation to the service that they had been provided, and it related to search and recovery scenes. There were 3 complaints and 1 negative feedback this quarter from Police Scotland related to timeliness of scene attendance. But just to put it a wee bit into context there, we attend around 3,300 scenes in a quarter. Then if we look at the overview of search and recovery scenes, which is slide 12, following the implementation of the National Tasking Unit, that's just over a year ago now, and the new ways of working in search and recovery scenes, the post-implementation review, as Fiona's already mentioned, being finalised. The Met review happened as well, so lots of really positive feedback and areas for improvement, which we will take forward and report back separately. Search and recovery scenes is of course a frontline responsive service to the public and our partners, and demand is obviously dependent on crime which is reported. As we discussed at the last Forensic Services Committee meeting, it's important that we aim to improve performance to better meet the needs of the public of Scotland. But just to state that attendance from our people at the most serious of incidents, the most high priority incidents, there's really strong performance there. The target is 90% attended within 24 hours, which we consistently meet. And most attendances are actually well within that 24-hour period. But we do know that attendance at the less serious of crimes require improvement there in terms of our timeliness. These are crimes such as housebreaking, theft of motor vehicle, etc., which impact many more people in our communities. So this, of course, is our area of focus and what the new operating model intends to deliver. And now we're really starting to see those improvements coming through. In the last quarter, there has been an improvement in the timeliness. We're now sitting at 81% within 24 hours from the request being received by us. So there continues to be focus in this area, of course, and we need to monitor the whole aspect from that scene request when it initially comes in. How, what do they look like? What's the value of them? Are they appropriate? All the way through to the tasking element and the deployment. Then if we look at slide 13, which is the overview of the lab delivery, it is an improving picture with demand and capacity broadly in balance. All casework demands are being met, so that's around 2,500 or so cases each month. However, we know that there needs to be an improvement in the timeliness aspect, and that, of course, is our continued focus. And this slide just want to point out that since the last report, the percentage of cases which have been reported within their due dates, so that's the pie chart on the right-hand side, the green part has improved from 70% last quarter to 78%. Slide 19 later in the report will highlight the internal areas of forensic services where that attention is needed and the closer monitoring is, of course, taking place currently. I also just want to point out at this point as well, it's important to note that there are no risks to statutory time limits not being met. Slide 14 talks about the delivery of the MOU, and it looks at the different priorities of casework across forensic services. So what this table shows is that we continue to deliver on the most urgent of casework demands from our partners. So that's your 7-day custody cases at the top there of the table. Crown Office urgent cases, these are just dipped below the target of 85 to 95%. So I have assessed it as amber at this point because of that. Our Police Scotland Priority 1 cases are being met as well within the timeliness, and indeed all other Crown Office demands are being met as well. So we're confident that the most urgent of work is prioritised correctly. It is, of course, a less positive picture that we can see for Police Scotland Priority 2 and Priority 3 cases, and it's recognised that this is where improvement needs to be made. The majority of this work in these two priority categories is volume crime unit DNA work and drugs possession cases. In relation to the volume crime unit DNA work, there's a small dedicated team here. We've got about 12 members of staff when we're fully complement. It's very challenging short turnaround times here. So it's 21 days or less compared with others, which are, say, up to about 90 days or so, 150 days. And it's very high demand. So that and P2 and P3, which means it skews the data quite quickly if we're below, more than 21 days in terms of our timeliness. But what I would say is since the previous quarter, there have been improvements there in terms of ECU DNA. The caseload has reduced by 50%, which is a real credit to the staff and the managers involved in that area. In terms of drugs casework, there was an increase in demand seen in Q3, which has had an impact on timeliness. But from a more positive perspective, the output from the drugs team did double in Q4. But we know that this is not where we want to be and needs further attention. Overall, though, a timeliness, as I say, is in need of attention in some areas, but there is no risk to cases being time barred. Then if we move on to slides 15 to 18, this looks at the crime groups over the past 3 years. And really where I just want to call out here is overall the majority has been assessed as on track in terms of capacity and demand. We can see that those trends there. And this work will, of course, be taken forward in terms of the strategic workforce planning and the forecasting work. We'll look back, but obviously we want to look forward in terms of what does the future demands for our organisation look like. But I wanted to point out the Group 5 crimes I have made assess this as amber because it's been managed closely and it's around the drugs, particularly the possession cases. And obviously this Group 5 also includes supply and production of drugs as well. Performance in this area is not where we want it, obviously, to be. And then the last slide, slide 19, focuses on our internal performance data. So what we've done is we've looked at all the different aspects within forensic services and said, well, where do we assess our performance based on the MOU, etc. So firstly, I want to call out the positive performance in biology, fingerprints, chemistry and documents, and post-mortem toxicology as well over the last 2 quarters. And what's really good to see is that sustained positive performance now in post-mortem toxicology for many months. So absolutely credit to the staff in this unit. And this, of course, was a real area of scrutiny through the transition of the service from the University of Glasgow to forensic services. Volume crime unit is DNA is amber. Mentioned this already. And the other areas I've assessed as amber are search and recovery scenes, drugs driving, and criminal toxicology. The latter being covered in the next item on the agenda. It's important to call out the 2 areas which we've assessed as red and need of attention. Drugs unit, I've mentioned that already, but also firearms. There are specific challenges at this time, however, casework demands are being delivered and there are no risks to statutory time limits not being met. Timeliness isn't where we want it to be, but we recognise that this is a very small team and they have both seen attendance and laboratory activities to deal with and prioritise. So there's a lot of demand on this small team. We have a new member of staff who's currently in the training part of their programme, and hopefully they'll soon have a positive impact in terms of capacity and will reap the benefits going forward. They've also had a number of large and very complex cases in recent months as well. So just in summary, I would say the overall performance is in a sound place, given the extent of change across the organisation, with no risk of statutory time limits not being met. I would like to call out the positive PM toxicology performance and that all urgent demands are being met across the organisation. And also the improvement seen in staff absence, which will of course have a positive impact on service delivery as well. There will be a continued focus on volume crime unit DNA, drugs units, activity and also firearms going forward, but it's important to note that it can take time to make real sustainable improvements for this to be reflected in the timeliness data in particular. And lastly, I just want to recognise the people across forensic services and their hard work and commitment to get us to where we are today. And we will obviously take forward in the business plan the priorities for the coming year. And at that, I'll pause and happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks very much for that very comprehensive run through the performance data, Vicky. And yes, I agree with you about the contribution that our staff are making. I also have to commend you all for the sickness absence rate reducing, and it's good to see so many people, particularly long-term sick people, returning to work. So that's very, very good to hear. Now, before I get into this, do other members have any questions or queries at this stage? Or anything? Well, I can maybe kick off then with, if we go to slide 12, which is the overview of search and recovery scenes. So we've got a year since the new system was put in place for scenes of crime. So I'm curious about the fall in demand. Will the target at some point be eventually met? Because we're still not quite there with that. At what point do you anticipate the target being met?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, for that question. As I mentioned, there's been a lot of change, particularly in search and recovery scenes. This was the first area where the change from the operating model was put in place. There've been some positive changes here in terms of the recruitment piece. There was a number of new staff within search and recovery scenes, and the training element has been taken forward there. So we've actually had 14 senior forensic scene examiners just in the last month who have completed their training. So they're now actually able to perform many, not quite all, but many of their duties on their own. So that is going to have a positive improvement in terms of performance. Sickness absence as well, particularly in this area of forensic services, has improved as well, which is good. In terms of when we will meet that target of 90%, I think it's important to note, first of all, that historically we've always been about 70 to 75% attendance within 24 hours for many years. So we are keeping up there towards that 90% overall. It is our area of focus. And it's hoped that more visible improvements in performance will be seen later on this year into quarter 3, quarter 4. In terms of that's the improvement planning activity, the forecasting activity is showing that at this point in time.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. So there will be an improvement, but I mean, is the 90% target, is that, if it's not achievable, why do we have it as the query? Obviously, if, but I mean, it's a year since we've reorganized this, and we want to see obviously demonstrable results. Now, I understand the triaging is reducing demand, but is the service actually working more efficiently, and how do we know that?
Yes, I mean, that's some of the elements will come out from the post-implementation review, which has already been mentioned, and the Met review has highlighted some areas where there's opportunity for improvement to be more efficient in terms of how we work. So there has been a short-life working group established already to take the improvement opportunities there from the Met review forward.
Okay. Before I leave slide 12, do any other members have any questions on the scenes? Excuse me. No? Okay. The next one I've got is, I think the next slide, item 13, and it's the 22% of active cases. Bear with me. Yeah. I'm looking for some further assurance on the lateness of the 22%, and is there any risk involved, particularly regarding any reduction in time limit?
Yeah, thanks.
In terms of the Crown Office.
Oh, thanks for that, Chair. There have been a number of discussions through various forums with COPFAS, Police Scotland and Scottish Government as well, in terms of the potential reduction from a statutory time limit of 12 months to 6 months for, which is obviously in line with the Coronavirus Act. And we are in a position where, particularly, obviously, it's the drugs driving, which is the area where we need to have really strongly monitor this and really have a real focus, and we'll come on to that later on in the next agenda item. But discussions, we are all planning for a potential where that 6-month timescale will come in later on this year. So in terms of statutory time limits not being met, we see that there isn't a risk in that within forensic services and the laboratory activities. I can see Fiona's got her hand up.
Yeah, Fiona.
Thank you. And just to add to Vicky's comments there, I think this is the area that the whole of the forensic services change programme is really aimed at making an impact on. However, it will take the full implementation of the operating model, and it will take longer for us to achieve that because of the financial challenges which everybody is facing. So as Vicky said, the risk of cases exceeding the statutory time limit is extremely low. And really what we see in this 22% is the delay in relation to police investigative cases. And really the strategy for forensic services and the operating model is all about moving the priority of these cases, particularly undetected cases, so that we're able to process those cases more quickly. And that in itself will reduce that 22% that you referred to, Chair. But in order to make that, that's a substantial change for forensic services to make, and it requires the operating model to be fully implemented and operating to deliver that benefit, which is clearly set out in the full business case there. So that's very much what we are focused on organisationally, and where we expect the change to have the biggest impact. So at the moment we are managing the implementation of change alongside the service delivery that Vicky's talked to, which in itself is difficult. But I think we can see through the performance report that change is being managed effectively by staff and management across forensic services. But ultimately, in order to make a big impact here, we need to drive through the full implementation and realise the benefits.
Okay, thanks for that. Can I ask then on page 35, and we've got obviously various greens, which is great, but some of the reds, I've got some queries about the priority 2 and priority 3 deliveries. It says here that you've got plans being taken forward to address these areas, which are mostly volume. Can you maybe expand upon that a little bit and give us some further assurance on that?
Yes. Slide 14, I think we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Sorry,
page 35 of my overall report, but it's slide 14. Apologies.
That's great. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so in terms of P2 and P3 deliveries, as Fiona said, these are the police investigative activities and work here. What we're looking at is really a more focused, for example, in volume crime unit DNA, a more focused use of prioritisation, the realignment of staff, and realignment of activities across different people to assist with this area of the business. So I think in the last report I had mentioned that the staff within search and recovery in the laboratory and also in reporting were assisting with that. So there's a number of mechanisms there to try and really improve the workflow, improve the timeliness of the different elements of the VCU process. And again, similarly with drugs, it's around getting that balance right between the Crown Office demands and the Police Scotland demands on the other hand, and making sure that we can flex the staff across that. Bearing in mind as well, as Fiona's already said, the operating model is not fully implemented as yet as per the full business case. There are a few challenges along the way there. We're not quite as further forward as we would have liked to be, but we are looking at our vacancies as they arise across the organisation and prioritising them based on a risk-based approach, particularly around performance.
Thanks for that. Any other questions from members on that? Okay, just seeing if there's anything else. Yeah, I put, this is on, I think it's slide 19. I think I've got a note down that drugs is marked as red, but there's a noted increase in output, which may return to green in due course. But there's no assurance given. Have I missed a chart with drug stats on it? Because are there, I don't recall seeing any figures with drugs on it. Sorry, it's possibly buried away there. No,
should we actually we have revised the reporting to have a much more strategic approach to and more of an insights approach to our report. In terms of drugs, yes, there was that increased demands in Q3, and then it took us to Q4. We have seen that increase in output. It's in a stronger position, but there's definitely room for improvement there, and we know that there's actions being taken forward by the managers in relation to that area.
Well, you say it's in a stronger position, but it's gone from amber to red. So how is that a stronger position? Yeah,
yes, in terms of, I think, during the quarter itself, because the output has increased. But I think Alistair wants to come in.
Alistair, yes, if you could.
If I can assist with that one, Chair, if that's okay. So comparing Q4 performance back to Q3, of the green indicators, they are broadly the same as the last quarter, and of those that weren't green, 2 out of the 3 have shown improvement. So it's really down to the lowest priority indicator there in terms of the MOU work. And what we've done is to, as Vicky said, realign resources to address that particular challenge. We've halted all non-critical work, and we've provided additional support from other areas, and we're also seeing a return from staff on mat leave as well.
Okay, thanks. So we look forward to seeing that improving. Great. And Vicky, you talked about the performance framework being revised a year ago. So it's due for another refresh, would I be thinking?
Yes, we're going to have a refresh later on this calendar year, and we'll obviously report that back into the committee.
Great. No, that's super. And obviously members will be involved in that, I'm sure. Because I've got a note down about reporting by exception on 1 or 2 items, and perhaps that would be a good point to pick that up there. Caroline.
I'm happy to come in when you finished your questions, Paul. Are you sure?
Yeah.
You've done?
I'm finished now.
Right, smashing. Okay, thanks. And thanks, Vicky, for the report. Very comprehensive. And I just want to do a bit of a shout out for all of you, actually, to say well done. Implementing a new operating model is difficult. So, and it's not going to get there. You know, it takes time to sort of bed all that in, etc. So I just want to say well done. And I guess my follow-up question is when do you expect to have it completely implemented? So that would be my first question. My second question is around the people and the sickness absence, which you've done. It's great progress on that. And I just wondered, you have a stretch target in there of 3.75. And I wondered for the year ahead, are we putting in any sort of positive action programs to try and achieve that? Because that's going to be critical in terms of keeping performance up. And my last question is around the sort of capacity and capability piece and the strategic workforce plan, and we just touched on that in the action log earlier. And I just wondered, when are we going to see that strategic workforce plan? Because I think that's going to be a critical piece for you in delivering this new operating model and building capacity to deliver this performance going forward. And in terms of scarcity of people in the market, perhaps growing our own talent. So it'd be good to see the outline plans for all of that. And I just wondered if there was an expected date for that. Thanks, Vicky, and that's me. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Caroline. In terms of when the operating model will be fully implemented, as Fiona's mentioned, that's very much dependent on finances. We are doing all we can internally to look at how we can invest internally in moving the operating model forward. So that I think will take some time. Again, Joanne's paper later on in the change touches on some of that activity there, so I'll perhaps leave that to later on in the agenda. In terms of absence, yes, positive improvement has absolutely been seen there, and for me that's been due to a number of initiatives. I mean, it's about keeping those going and making sure we continue to have that focus, which we will internally through our own governance arrangements, our own performance framework reporting internally. And those have really been around, for example, the operating model with staff, managers being with their staff. Rather than previously, we had areas of the business, it was remote management, which is obviously not ever as effective as people being on site. We've had a significant focus on the training and development of managers, particularly the new first line manager role within the organisation and the CTM's capability team managers. So that real focus on people policies, how to have difficult conversations, how to support people back into the workplace, all of that is really, really important. And there needs to be a continued refresh of that as we go forward. And that will be part of the management and training plan for forensic services. And also as well, we're looking at that swifter referral to support mechanisms, whether that be occupational health or EAP, our employee assistance programme. So it's about making sure that's all available to staff and managers and they take that forward. And then your last question about strategic workforce planning, I'll perhaps hand over to either Fiona or Alan, Alan's leading on that work, Fiona.
Yeah, thank you. So Caroline, that's captured in the Forensic Services Refresh Business Plan. So the target that we're working to there is really to the end of the calendar year to get that updated. There's a short life working group that Alan Connell is going to lead on with partners and various other people, particularly resource deployment within Police Scotland, to look at how we have a strategic workforce plan that really does what it should do, which is making sure we're fit for the future and that we're building the skills in the workforce within forensic services that are required. Critical to that is the demand forecasting. And we have now had the first meeting of the demand forecasting short life working group again, which will feed into the strategic workforce plan. So that will give us a better 5-year view ahead of what expected changes in service provision are required. So what I hope to get out of the strategic workforce plan this year is a proper view of how we're going to change the shape of the workforce moving forward to make sure that we can deliver what Police Scotland and the Crown Office want from the service, in line with changing legislation and also the horizon scanning work that has been done.
Smashing. So before I leave next March, I'll see the strategic workforce plan, will I?
You
yes,
will.
I'm holding you to that. I'm writing that down. Thank you for that update. Thank you.
Don't go wishing your life away. Next March is far too soon. Anyway, Mary.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm sure Caroline will have that in our diary now to check. But you know, we're all looking forward to seeing that. I just wanted to reflect for a minute on some of the information that's in the report, particularly in the last page of the report. And Paul has already touched on this in relation to the drugs unit work shifting from amber into red this quarter. And I couldn't help but reflect on the frustration that they must feel, given that they've employed a lot of improvement methodologies and techniques to give themselves more than 50% increase in output. And yet, because of increased in demand, which they can't do anything about, they're showing as red. Now, what I think we heard from Alistair that that's likely to turn around again and should be back into amber again. But I just wondered if you could talk me through what you would do about a team which was clearly focused on trying to improve, was achieving that, but still at the end of the day, because of something else that they can't control, the record will show that this quarter they're showing red.
Thanks, Mary. Very interesting question there. And this is where it's really important that our managers are having discussions with their people around what our expectations are, what is the value that forensic science can bring to the criminal justice, and then translating our strategic outcomes, our strategic objectives into what it means for them. As we know, we cannot control demand in terms of crime happens, it ebbs and flows. We can see that throughout all our casework and scene attendance activity. But it's important that the managers look at continuous improvement. They look at supporting their staff and having those discussions with them on what this data actually means, what it means for them. It's very much around culture change as well, and looking at that focus on more around performance that we perhaps have done in the past, and working together in relation to that. Very much about discussions, I would say.
Alistair, you wanted to come in?
Thanks very much. So I was just going to add to that, there's perhaps some additional work that we could do in terms of triaging to see if there's any low or lower value adding work that could be removed there. I touched on mutual support. So between the teams, some of the staff members have transferable skills, able to use that as well. But as Vicky said, we're aiming to embed very much a mindset of continuous improvement as standard right across all the teams, not just in drugs, but right across all the teams. And that will help us to realise these benefits in due course. Thanks.
Thank you very much for both of those answers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Can I just say thank you, Mayor? It's a really insightful question, and it's a really big challenge. And I would also highlight, in addition to my colleagues' comments here, that this is a group of staff that have been significantly impacted by change through the implementation of the operating model. So nobody in the senior management team or in forensic services more widely underestimates the impact that change has had on this group in particular. And we are going through a process of supporting them through that change process. And it's great to see that the improvement from a relatively low position in Q3 into Q4. I think that there is a level of understanding across the service that there's a lag from when you see that improvement in the performance, which we have seen in Q4, that it's not shown within the timeliness performance, and that's really because of what happened in the quarter previously. So you've kind of got a bulk of work that is older, and therefore it has to come through the system. So I think that the staff would understand that it gets worse before it gets better. So we can see through the forecasting work that we've got and the better management information that we have internally now, so that the staff can see the impact that they're having, albeit it will take some time to come through within the management information. But certainly I think this is where we see the impact of change across the organisation and the need for strong management support for the people that are impacted to take them through that process and to ultimately to recover the performance level.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fiona. I think it's important the committee understands that gets worse before it gets better element as well. And so the discussion today has helped with that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, thanks very much to our officers for that. I'm going to move the business on to the next agenda item, which is item number 3.3, the drug driving update. And I believe that's you, Alistair Patience, that's introducing that. So over to you, Alistair.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So in terms of the drug driving update, I will take the paper as read as normal, but I'll draw out some key points on the way through, and you'll notice that the format of the report is slightly different this time. So as members will be aware, in October 2019, Section 5A of the Road Traffic Act came into force in Scotland. That legislation set out specific offences of driving with specified controlled drug above a specified limit. And Section 4 of the same Act sets out an offence of driving while impaired or unfit through work. Forensic Services carries out the toxicological analysis and samples recovered in relation to both of these offence types. In 2022, it became clear that a significant number of cases had been unable to proceed to prosecution due to delays in the analysis within the laboratory, which resulted in insufficient time to initiate any proceedings. The root cause of that related to insufficient capacity being available within the laboratory to meet the level of demand. And as a result of that, HMICS instigated and reported on an assurance review of the forensic toxicology provision. Following the issue, funding was provided by our Scottish Government colleagues to outsource drug driving toxicological analysis, and that allowed the toxicology team to set out a detailed improvement plan to enhance the internal capacity through recruitment, training of staff, process efficiency and method development, similar to what we've just discussed in relation to drugs. The statutory time limit extension, as we mentioned earlier, has been reviewed annually. The last review was in November 2023, where a further 12-month extension to the statutory time limit was agreed. However, we are operating on an assumption that this extension will not be approved further in relation to Section 5A and Section 4 cases, and as such, any incidents recorded from June this year will have a 6-month statutory time limit applied, in essence. A memorandum of understanding has been agreed between ourselves, Police Scotland and Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, and that document sets out the standards required in relation to drug driving cases. Moving on to page 4 of the report, alluded to the first version of the toxicology improvement plan, so that was going back to October 2022. That has been refreshed in Q4 of last year, and the outcomes for the latest version are set out within this report. These plans are underpinned by an expected level of demand that is set out in the agreed MOU between the parties. Significant progress was made in delivery of the first version of the plan, and to meet agreed levels of service, the gap between demand and capacity was managed by outsourcing to an external private provider in England. The outcome of that planned activity was to grow the internal capacity within the toxicology team, as stated previously. And the graph on page 5 there illustrates actual and output versus planned capacity over the last financial year. The annual internal capacity was planned to be 1797 cases, and the actual output delivered internally was 1566, which was around 87% of target. The reason for that variation relates to a range of issues, including delays in the process to gain accreditation from UCAS, excuse me, in relation to validation of new instrumentation, change of methods, alongside additional time taken to recruit new staff into posts within the team. However, the overall demand for Section 5A and Section 4 drug driving cases last year was 2933. That was 6% higher than the planned demand, which was expected to be 2760. To improve the timeliness of reporting and remove extraordinary measures that were in place, outsourcing was utilised throughout the year, and in total 1145 were planned to be outsourced, and the actual cases delivered by outsourced partner was 2110, which included some cases that were submitted prior to the start of the financial year. Moving on to page 6. So therefore, the total cases completed both internally and externally last year was 3676, which was 25% higher than the overall demand over this period. So that has supported the overall reduction in the caseload and the improvement in terms of the timeliness of provision of results. There have seen some timeliness performance issues experienced by our outsourced partner, primarily due to the unanticipated fluctuations in demand from police forces in England and Wales. When we realised there was an issue, we took immediate action there, engaged quickly with the provider, and a robust improvement plan was put in place, and significant improvements have been noted. A minority of outsourced cases have been reported closer to the statutory time limit than we would have liked, but that has not resulted in any cases that were unable to proceed to prosecution. As a result of the work, timeliness of the provision of results has improved. Robust performance has been delivered internally for Section 5A cases. However, the Section 4 cases are more problematic due to the amount of sequential analysis that can be involved to identify more unusual drugs which were not part of the standard testing panel for Section 5A drugs. As I've alluded to, the MOU has been developed and signed by partners, and each part of that process has a target time frame for completion, which is shown in the end-to-end process flow at the foot of page 6. So within forensic services, the internal targets have been set as follows: 95% of 5A cases to be completed within 90 days, 95% of Section 4 cases to be completed within 120. The targets recognise that with the current process and methodology, it's not possible to routinely deliver the analysis and reporting of the Section 4 cases within the 3-month overall target. However, as a result, this requires other parts of the system to be more efficient in these case types. We are focusing more attention on these Section 4 cases and the internal processes associated with that to be more efficient, and that is captured in the updated improvement plan. Prior to this being in place, there is an increased risk that these cases cannot be completed in the anticipated return of the 6-month statutory time limit. However, it is important to note that they only form around 15% of the total demand for drug driving toxicology cases, and there is more focus on that area in terms of efficiencies. The performance for 5A has been robust across the year, and significant focus, as I've said, in relation to Section 4. The outputs are highly variable in terms of that numbers, as in terms of being relatively small. At the top of page 8, that details the percentage of Section 5A and Section 4 cases on target. And to move on to the refreshed toxicology improvement plan, which we're referring to as version 3. There's optimization of Section 4 analysis there to enable delivery to the 90 days in line with the Section 5A timescale, and increasing internal capacity to 270 cases by the end of the year. Now, in order to achieve that, some internal capacity is required to focus on these development activities, as it's our own staff who are doing that. The gap between the anticipated internal capacity and the planned demand is complemented by an extended outsourcing plan for the year ahead. And there is an implication there in terms of drug spiking cases which have been taken within the department as well, and that's referenced in 2.19. So the figure below, which is the top of page 9 now, details the planned output in terms of cases per month, taking us through to March 2025. So to summarise for the year ahead, a clear development plan is in place to ensure that the process is enhanced to allow the Section 4 cases to be completed within 90 days. There is a risk, albeit relatively small, that demand for drug driving toxicology analysis exceeds the planned level. And we've seen over the initial period of time this year, we've seen a 15% higher than expected demand level. However, it is trending down. And that increase in demand is likely to be, at least in part, relate to the festive drink and drug driving campaigns. In order to mitigate the risk of cases exceeding the statutory time limit, it's really important that a backlog of cases is not allowed to grow within the lab. So any cases more than the planned internal capacity will essentially be outsourced on receipt. That is a change to the position within the toxicology team.
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
Certainly, Chair. So any cases more than the planned internal capacity will be outsourced on receipt. So essentially, if our internal capacity is 250 and the demand is 270, then we will we'll outsource the balance. As the outsourcing plan has been funded based on the agreed demand set out in the MOU, there is a risk that the budget for outsourcing could be exceeded this year. In terms of the long-term sustainable model, so that's referring to 2.24 on page 10. Police Scotland's articulated their ambition to roll out roadside testing further than it is currently. As a result of that, that will increase the demand for subsequent analysis, and referred there to options paper which have been developed and discussed by all partners and presented to the Scottish Government, setting out how that additional demand could be delivered with an indication of associated costs. We recognise that a business case is now required, and to develop this, several enabling work streams are in progress, including progressing the HMICS recommendations in relation to understanding the scale of drug driving in Scotland, and also considering the education, awareness and prevention activities. A revised long-term forecast of demand, considering changes in the model of policing referred to earlier, and development of the toxicology strategy and associated technology roadmap to maximise the benefits that we'll get from our ways of working. A further update on the progress to develop the business case will be provided to the October meeting of the Forensic Services Committee, and I can provide assurance that work on all the above work streams is underway currently. And I'll just pause there. Quite a lot of information in the report I just want to draw out there, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thanks very much for that very comprehensive presentation, Alistair. Can I just roll it back to a technical question that popped up while you were talking about Section 4s, and you made reference to one of the complications being some of the more, for want of a better description, obscure drugs that you're trying to find in these. On the basis that sometimes the best is the enemy of the good, I'm curious, is that, what would prompt you doing that? If you found some evidence of drug use in a sample that would result in a report going to the Crown Office and someone almost certainly being disqualified for drug driving, is there any value in going and searching for some of the more obscure drugs that might be in that sample, if you're sure you're going to get a conviction? Or am I overthinking this?
No, that's a good question there, Chair. I've perhaps confused the issue on the way through. So essentially what it is, if the samples are coming back as negative in terms of the analysis, then we could be looking for a needle in a haystack, if I could use that analogy.
No, that makes perfect sense.
Historically, we're trying to continue the testing to find out what has caused the impairment.
There we go. Thanks for that. Okay, the other question I got was about the long-term sustainable model, and exactly when do we anticipate a business case coming forward for that? I don't know if that's you or if that would be Fiona that would be able to answer that. Fiona.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that, Chair. So I am anticipating that we will see a business case, whether it's an initial business case or a full business case, I think remains to be confirmed in the autumn. And that's important because I want to make sure that we have a good understanding of what the options are and what the potential costs might be before we start the budget discussions for the 25-26 budget. So that's the timescale that we're working to. There are a number of enabling work streams, so it is important that we make progress on those. The demand forecasting one is particularly critical, but so also is the internal strategy piece, because what we need to do is to make sure that we're driving as much efficiency internally as we can, and looking at how we work together across criminal toxicology and post-mortem toxicology to make sure that we can maximise the output internally, which obviously then reduces the additional investment costs that would be required for the long-term sustainable model. So these pieces are critical. We have now assigned project management support from Joanne's change team, so that we will have full plans in relation to developing that business case. But there is still quite a lot of work to be done before I think we can finalise what that looks like. But we're not starting on a blank sheet of paper here. Over the past 3 or 4 years, we have done a lot of work on a long-term sustainable model, and an options paper was provided to Scottish Government a good few years ago, which has been refreshed a number of times. I think the purpose of developing the business case is to put some simplicity, I think, back into the options, which have become quite complex over that period. So we have a number of different moving pieces here that will come together. So I'm relatively confident that we will have a lot of clarity when we get to the autumn. Whether we've got a full business case completed at that point, there's still a little bit of ambiguity, but we'll certainly have an outline business case at that stage.
Okay, thanks for that. Do members have any other questions on this? Seeing any hands up. I've got maybe one or two. Let's see, where are we? Yes, it's on slide 9. Item 2.21, you make reference to the performance improvements required for Section 4s. Now, I talked about Section 4s already. You talk about clear development plan being in place, but I don't think you've got any details as to what's involved in that. So can you maybe give us a little bit more on that, to flesh that out a wee bit, just a bit more colour, perhaps?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, certainly. So essentially what we are doing, so in terms of the Section 4 cases, if I can just give a little bit more detail there. So we'll be prioritising these on receipt, making sure that there's no delays in the processing. If at all possible, we will carry out concurrent testing to make sure there's no downtime. We'll increase the number of batches that are running off Section 4s. We'll make sure there's no dead time in the process associated with the forensic scientists, and we'll make sure that we're reporting results at the target date and not beyond that. In addition, we are going to outsource as many of the Section 4 cases as we can in order to give us that headway to carry out the development work. And in terms of the development work, there's a new instrument which will be brought on stream, or a second instrument. We'll be building additional capacity by bringing that on stream, and in the fullness of time, there'll be further verification exercises carried out, so a larger number of drugs can be targeted in the analytical process, so there's less requirement on a staged approach, looking for that needle in the haystack. So I think that's what I would say, working much more closely between the criminal toxicology team, the post-mortem toxicology team, trying to standardise instrumentation as much as possible, using skills to best effect, and having a business continuity plan fallback as well, Chair. Does that answer your question?
I'm happy with that, yeah. Okay, thanks very much for that. If there's no other questions, if there are no other questions from members, I'm going to suggest we move the business on then, and that will take us to item 3.4, which is the Forensic Services Financial Monitoring Report. And again, it's Director Fiona Douglas who will be introducing that. Fiona, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report provided to this meeting today is the period 11 report, which seems like a long time ago now, but we're in the end of year reporting is still underway just now. So what the period 11 report shows is that the Q3 forecast was for an underspend versus budget of 0.5 million. With lower pay costs offsetting higher non-pay costs. The lower pay spend reflects the challenges in recruitment, which we discussed at length in the last Forensic Services Committee meeting, and is also an area of focus captured in the 2-year business plan, which we'll come to later on today. 0.4 million of non-pay increases relates primarily to post-mortem toxicology outsourcing costs, which weren't budgeted for at the start of the last financial year. Actual spend to the end of period 11 was 0.1 million higher than the Q3 forecast, and that's driven by non-pay related overspends. In relation to capital, the Q3 forecast was for a reduction from the budget of 1 million due to spend being paused, if not legally committed by Police Scotland, in order to help manage the capital spend across the whole organisation. So that resulted in slippage in projects for the last financial year. Actual spend to the end of period 11 for capital was in line with the forecast of 0.5 million. However, some deliveries were expected to slip into next year, with the expected spend on capital to come in at around 700,000 by the end of last financial year. From a reform perspective, there was a forecast of a 0.4 million under budget, which reflects less staff resources being used during the year than budgeted, and that's really due to some of the challenges around resourcing the project management office team that supports forensic services as a service back from Police Scotland. Spend year to date on forensic services projects is in line with the Q3 forecast. The appendix that's provided to members goes through the detail in relation to the finances, so I'm happy to take any questions from members.
Can I ask about the capital slippage? Because I'm looking on slide 10 and it says the original capital budget was 1.76 million. And you're saying even with slippage, that 700,000 has been spent. What's happened to the other million, and is there any risk arising from not spending that million?
There are no significant risks, albeit that there's an overarching risk in relation to the porting of capital that was planned for last year into this financial year. So a lot of the slippage was outside of Forensic Services control through the instruction from Police Scotland to pause the non-committed expenditure partway through the year. So that meant that some projects could not be concluded within the financial year. So that's where the reforecast happened to 800,000, and we are expected to come in at 700,000, which is just slightly short of that. So all in all, I think it isn't a helpful process from Forensic Services in relation to the overall management of capital through last financial year, but the process is changing for the year ahead. So I'm confident that that risk shouldn't move across into this financial year. Internally, there are a number of things that we're looking at to make our capital procurement process more effective within Forensic Services and working with our colleagues in procurement. So we have now got a single point of contact, and we're working to look at setting up a centralised team to deal with capital purchase rather than it being spread out across the different business areas within Forensic Services. So there are a number of improvements that we're looking at to be more efficient and effective at the capital purchases that we make, whilst also alongside our purchases across Forensic Services, looking at a more centralised model and making sure that we've got full legal compliance with procurement practice and financial spend.
Well, that's really helpful, thanks. Any questions from members on this? Caroline.
Thanks. Thanks, Fiona, for the report. I mean, it's all pretty much in line with what you were forecasting. I think I'm just going to refer back to the capital piece. And I fully appreciate that the pause midway through the year was not helpful in terms of being able to execute your plans. However, that will have knock-ons into this year, because obviously when there's a budget set and you've got plans to spend that, then you don't spend it. The things you haven't bought, therefore, go into the next year. And when we're in a land of reducing kind of availability of capital, that becomes really, really critical for our business and critical for your delivery of your new operating model. So I guess my question really then is, do you have a sort of month-by-month plan for this year on capital spend? How are you reprioritising what you were already forecasting, but given that you've got some knock-ons into this year, so how are you reprioritising them in terms of urgency? And is there something that you could report on to us? Because I do think getting your capital out the door early is really, really important. It's something that we've worked with Police Scotland a lot, rather than waiting for the sort of Q4 panic because things haven't gone to plan. So I think having a plan monthly where things are going out the door or you're expecting things, and then to be able to track and trace, that's hugely important. Just because when you get capital pounds now, it's hugely important that we get them out the door and spend them so that we are getting that, because they're going to get increasingly rare and you just want to maximise them. So I think having a sort of knockdown plan is hugely important to delivery that. I note the improvements in procurement, etc., but I do think a plan sort of holds everyone's feet to the fire if you have it sort of monthly as to what's going out the door. Thanks.
No, thank you, Caroline. Yes, we do. We do have a month-by-month plan in relation to capital expenditure. It is all profiled into the first half of the financial year, which should then allow for any delays, both with suppliers, but also the challenges that our procurement colleagues have in relation to resources that they have available to them to be able to support the procurement work. So we have this year submitted all of the appropriate documentation to procurement, so they're better able to forward plan in relation to Forensic Services capital purchases, which should again help them to be able to allocate our our procurement processes accordingly. There is risk, I think, within procurement due to the challenging nature of where Police Scotland are at and the decisions that they've had to make in line with reducing the potential budget overspend last year. So we need to continue to work really closely, and we do have very strong links and a very professional service provision from procurement to support forensic services. As I said, we have now got a central team and a single point of contact that is driving through the capital purchases for this year. So we've taken that away from individual business areas and put it into one individual's responsibility under Alan Connell, who has the overall responsibility for the capital programme within forensic services.
Perfect.
So that's where we do the prioritisation of what's required. We do have a good internal process around business case for that are provided from people for investment in capital that we would consider and then prioritise what eventually is purchased. So I would say it's an area where we haven't been as strong as we should have been previously, but I have a lot of confidence for the year ahead that we're going to push the purchasing of the capital in the first half of the year, which then gives us that space to have a few areas that push into the remainder of the year. Plus that change in the overall approach to capital across the organisation should mean that we shouldn't end up partway through the year seeing the reduction in the overall capital budget.
I think, you know what, getting it out the door in the first 6 months is a superb strategy. And if you can do that, that would be a big win. My other comment on that would be to make sure, because the Q4 wash up, as there always is in a big organisation with moving parts, is that sometimes there is slippage, and therefore I would have a few projects on the stocks that you can bid into Police Scotland, because there will be, there's always slippage, and therefore you could bring forward some of next year's plans if you could get that into a Q4 if there was an underspend somewhere. So that's why I would encourage that you're kind of have a real control over that capital visibility, so that you can and some almost like ready to rock and roll purchase orders that you can get out the door, because you just want to really maximise any pounds that we get now. Yeah,
I completely agree, and we absolutely have a couple of projects that will be on the back burner, which we're expecting to spend in the following financial year that we could pull back if funding becomes available. We are doing a lot of work on our longer term capital planning alongside this change in the in-year capital spend. So we have a piece of work ongoing around developing technology roadmaps across each of the different disciplines that will inform then, alongside the research development and innovation strategy, what our future 5-year capital programme looks like, which allows us to do a lot more of articulation of that in the context of outcomes for the public, which is, I know, is something that we've not really been able to do before. We talk about ad hoc instrumentation without being able to describe what impact that's going to have in terms of the delivery of future forensic services. So I think that will also be important, and it will allow us to be more intelligent about how we bid for capital year on year, and also exploit any opportunities to access further funding.
Absolutely. And having spent years of selling software, let me tell you, signing lines of code, you have to upsell the benefits. And it's exactly the same in your business, because machines on their own are not very exciting. What you can do with them and the benefits they give you is hugely exciting. So that sounds like a good strategy. So we'll be interested to see if we can monitor how we're going throughout the year then. So in October, I'll be looking to see that it's all out the door.
I hope Alan is listening.
I have to say, you're ready to rock and roll.
That's 2 diary notes.
You're ready to rock and roll comment threw up a memory from my last fortnight at school, where there was some serendipitous capital expenditure which resulted in the music department finally getting new musical instruments, including a drum kit of all things. And then 2 weeks later I was away. So never mind, a long time ago now. Right, great. Thanks very much for that, Caroline. It's always, your insights into capital and budgeting is always really helpful. So I'm going to move the business on now. Thank you again, Fiona, for a lot of these explanations. It's, the thing is that forensics have been very good scouts in terms of finance and, corporately, and in other areas I've worked in. directors treat the budget as if it's their own personal checkbook, and they wouldn't part with a farthing if they could back into the corporate pot when things get tight. But that's never been the case with forensics. So yeah, anyway, we've had a good discussion on this, and I'm going to move us on then to the next agenda item, which is the HMICS assurance review of the forensic toxicology provision. And again, that's you, Fiona, and we've got Brian Johnson from HMICS here, and of course we've still got Ruth McQuaid, so I'll maybe bring them in due course. So Fiona, if you want to introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. So there's a detailed paper that has been provided to members, which summarises the progress against each of the HMICS recommendations raised in the report on the drug driving toxicology service that HMICS undertook last year. All in all, there is good progress noted within the report. For members' benefit, the blue within the report is the complete or submitted with recommendations for closure. The purple is good progress towards completion, and the green is on target and under management control. Those are the three that are relevant to the status of each of the recommendations set out. We do review the overall status of the recommendations at the Strategic Oversight Board, and HMICS also helpfully attended the last meeting of that Strategic Oversight Board, which took place in March. So what the report is telling us is that of the 25 recommendations that HMICS made, 7 of those, or 30% of them, has been marked as complete or submitted with a recommendation for closure. Then we have 16 that are on target. We've made good progress towards completion. However, there have been some changes in timescales in relation to the action plans within some of those, and that timescale has been discussed with HMICS colleagues. And then we have 2 of them which are tracking at green, which is on target and under management control. And it's those 2 that I'll perhaps highlight to members today. One of those relates to collation of data to look at an assessment of the prevalence of drug driving. And this is an area that Police Scotland are leading on, that has engagement across a range of different stakeholders. This really requires some detailed research to look at data, to collate and understand the data that is available. We have had a number of discussions with colleagues at SIPA, the Scottish Institute for Policing Research, and there is a meeting coming up to discuss what research SIPA could undertake to support the closure of this recommendation. But also there's a lot of discussion with colleagues at Justice Analytical Services in Scottish Government in relation to data that is held. But there's an action plan that is set out there, which will allow us to provide evidence to HMICS to recommend closure. There's still work that needs to be completed there. The other recommendation that's tracking at green is in relation to the drug driving enforcement model, and really that's in and around Police Scotland's ambition of rolling out the roadside testing across to local policing officers. There is a pilot that's planned to be undertaken in N Division to look at training of local policing officers to undertake that roadside testing in Shetland. So there's further discussions just around the timescales for that. But really the fundamental piece in this recommendation 20 is the long-term sustainable model and development of that business case, which we touched on in Alistair's drug driving update. So I'll pause there, Chair, but I or Alistair or Susie Chow, I'm sure from Police Scotland, would be happy to answer any questions.
Grand, thanks. And I'll maybe just get Brian in first, and then Ruth, if you've got any comments on this. So Brian, over to you first.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Fiona, and it's been interesting hearing the updates so far. I also welcome the opportunity, or we've actually attended the Strategic Oversight Board previously. That was really good, and looking forward to the next meeting on the 28th of May. I would like to say that the progress that has been made has been good. Looking forward to further progress, and I have been meeting with colleagues from Police Scotland in the last couple of weeks as well, just to discuss some of the details about prevention activity and what we learned during the review. So the relationships are still there. We are in communication, and I think it might be worthwhile actually, Fiona, if myself and Craig could meet with yourself and Alistair maybe within the next month or 2 months, just to discuss some of the finer details, because obviously what you've said there just now in relation to that recommendation in CIPA, really important obviously to see the scale and nature, especially in some of the conversations I've had with Police Scotland of late, you know, the progress that they're making as well with N Division, and hoping that's basically going to be a coordinated approach in respect of, obviously with, you know, without putting any extra stress on what the challenges exist currently. So the good thing is it appears coordinated, progress has been made, and just in the last couple of weeks as well, Chair, we've had further correspondence about closure of some recommendations, which might be some of these ones you've touched upon there, Fiona. So I've got the dates in the diary along with Craig to review these as well. So hopefully if there's anything sitting that, as you mentioned, the colour, that might be closed, or there'll be feedback accordingly. So it's in hand.
So, because I was going to ask about the aspects submitted for closure, is there any, are you in a position to respond to those yet, or is it still a work in progress?
Yeah, it's a work in progress,
Okay,
Chair.
thanks.
There has, since the last update, there was correspondence put back, and Craig obviously fed back at the oversight board. I know there's been updates submitted since that, and likewise Alistair had corresponded with ourselves at HMICS. So it's just the matter of, basically there is diary space that's already taken out. It's just a matter of reviewing, decision, and then reporting back.
Yeah, we'll have to sit and wait and see and hear back from you. Ruth, is there anything you've got to pitch in at this stage?
Not
compulsory,
Paul. I mean, just note again the good progress, and we're in a much better place. As far as that, I'm not receiving any concerns from my staff who are directly engaged in that at the moment, so that's got to be a good sign. So
yeah, I agree. And Suzanne, anything you want to add at this point?
Apologies. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to note the good collaboration between my colleague, Chief Superintendent Sloan and her team, and Alistair and the team. You know, they're working really hard to ensure that collaborative working and joined up approach there. So nothing else. Thank you. Great. Thanks for that. I've just got one question, which is the purple instead of amber. What's the difference between a purple in the RAG status and amber?
So the purple is the good progress towards completion, Chair, and then the amber at risk or late but under control.
But it's good progress, not still late, but under control.
Alistair, maybe you can help out with your
might
key.
Be splitting hairs here, but
no, I think you've got a fair point there, Chair, and I'll try and answer as best as I can. So based on the recommendations that were made, we pulled together an action plan to address each of these recommendations, and the timescales associated with that tie into the activities that we thought would be required. Now, through dialogue with Brian and Craig, sometimes there's additional work that's required or additional suggestions that have been made. So on the basis of that, there's been a reforecast there. So hopefully that answers the question, but sometimes there's been an unexpected delay. For example, the introduction of our new THC method has taken longer than anticipated, but it's out with our control. So we've made the assessment based on the circumstances that prevail.
Okay, now grand. If members have no other questions, I'm going to move us on to the Forensic Services Change Programme. Thank you everyone for your input into that. So Forensic Services Change Programme, which is agenda item number 5, and Fiona, that's again for you to introduce.
That will be Joanne Tierney.
Joanne, do beg your pardon. Joanne, welcome Joanne, good morning.
No problem. Yes, thank you, Chair. I will take the paper as read, but pull out a few key highlights. As you know, our change programme covers 4 key projects that are ongoing at the moment. The deployment of scene examination project, which is in its final stages, our operating model project, forensic services core operating system and data migration project, and our data governance project. Attached in the paper at Appendix A is our change programme plan, which sets out the high-level delivery milestones of the programme, which has recently been refreshed following conclusion of Phase 1 and Phase 2 of our operating model implementation, which I'll go on to talk about. Some highlights: the change programme continues to track green for most key delivery milestone activity. The tasking unit and the new ways of working in scenes continue to be embedded in the organisation. And as Fiona mentioned earlier, we've had a slight delay to the PIR due to an unforeseen absence, but it's at the final stages of review with our Police Scotland colleagues, and we hope to have that submitted imminently. To avoid any duplication, we will be looking to coordinate activity with the action plan and working group, which has been set up in response to the external Metropolitan Police review of the tasking unit. So we'll provide updates on that activity in due course. All of our people have now transitioned to their contracts and role profiles for the majority of circumstances, and further embedding of our capability search, recovery, analysis and reporting continues as per the programme plan. So people are now working within their capabilities and in their line management structure in those capabilities, and I'll talk a wee bit more in detail about that activity when I come on to the operating model. Our initial management development training programme for capability team managers has been completed, and we're taking that as a template for moving forward with to support our service delivery managers and our operations crime managers. We have some new recruits into those roles, but we've also got long-standing members in those roles that have transitioned from previous team manager roles. So we're very keen to make sure that we're offering the support that helps deliver on our operating model approach to management, which sees much more emphasis on our people and performance focused approach. We have a key activity scheduled for the Leadership Day, which is upcoming, which will really be about translating that vision and values of our new approach to management in terms of practical activities and sessions with our managers. The development of the full business case for our core operating system does continue to progress, but as you will have seen in the report, the delivery of a full business case for June 2024 is no longer achievable. We're working on a replan approach to that, very much engaging with our colleagues in procurement and digital division. We've now managed to secure a dedicated resource for them, and we're working very proactively with that resource to properly map out a still ambitious but achievable time frame for that, and that will be available for review in due course. And
what is that time frame?
So as I say, we're working at the moment to map out a dedicated timeline for that, and that will be available. It will take longer than we had anticipated, but we're very keen, and I must say all of our colleagues are very much on board in terms of investing in really proper planning at this stage to make sure the product that is produced will deliver what's required. I see Fiona has her hand up and would maybe like to come in on that point as well.
Please.
Thanks, Joanne. I think it's too early to answer your question outright, Paul. My expectation is that once we've completed the replan, it will be 18 months at least until we see the full business case, if not up to 2 years. We're working with colleagues in digital division and procurement now to look at options that we have that could reduce that time frame and understand the risks associated with those options. As Joanne says, now that we have dedicated resource from digital division, I think that this will allow the project to move at more pace, but also a more structured approach to the planning in and around that. So there is progress continuing to be made, and we will confirm the timescale once that replan activity is completed, but that needs to go through to the next project board as a change request because we're substantially away from the timescales which we had originally anticipated.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so Joanna, Do carry on.
Okay, no problem. You will also see in Appendix B our benefits realisation dashboard, which has been presented at the previous committee. This is an updated one to reflect progress. I wasn't anticipating going through each of the benefits, but what I did want to reinforce is that we are in the process of really very firmly embedding the benefits realisation within the business. We've identified business owners. We're very keen to make sure that we are monitoring and tracking ongoing progress or any other emerging benefits from our operating model, which may have developed subsequent to those initially set out in the full business case. As I say, we've identified business owners at the appropriate level, and we're really keen to make sure that we're pulling out those links with the performance framework as well and the targets associated with the performance framework and the performance reporting. So the benefits dashboard, as I say, will continue to be an update in the change programme, but very much making effective links with the performance framework as we continue to embed that much more in the business rather than a change driven activity, looking for ownership and progression within the business. And again, quite a lot of that is linked to the efficiencies plan work as well. So we're making sure all of that activity is coordinated as we progress through that. In terms of some of the points made earlier around the timeframe for completion of implementation with the operating model. So just to provide a little bit more information on that, as you know, given the financial uncertainty and the financial challenges, we adopted very much more a phased approach to implementation of the operating model. Phase 1 was very much focused on our people issues, landing our new roles, which we obviously, as you reported previously, we've introduced our new capability team manager role, which we're really seeing the benefits for. And we've got a great group of enthusiastic individuals really providing that one-to-one and focused people management approach. And key other people activities were transitioning people to their new line management structure and roles. Phase 2 was very much looking at the practicalities of workflow and routine and what we could do to maximise the opportunity of the implementation of the operating model as far as possible, given the financial constraints. What we are phase 1 and phase 2 are now complete. We've got identified work streams for phase 3, learning the lessons from how we approached our practical work streams in phase 2, and what we are developing there, detailed scoping documents for those phase 3 work streams with articulated outcomes so that we can map progress and very much milestones of activity. All of that planning is going to result in very much us being able to paint the picture of what implementation of the operating model as far as possible will look like as an end game status, given the financial constraints within which we're operating and our commitment to reinvesting, self-investing in the operating model. So that scoping activity continues, and we're hoping to have a SMT workshop in the next few weeks to finalise that, make sure that we have properly articulated that end game status, and I'll be able to report back on that, what that looks like in due course. As I say, we engage very effectively with our Police Scotland colleagues in the change process. So as we've reached some milestones with phase 1 and phase 2 implementation of the operating model, I am in the process of engaging with Police Scotland colleagues in portfolio assurance as to what staged reviews and assurance reviews would look like for those, pending a full post-implementation review of the operating model when we achieve that end game status. So happy to leave the report there and take any questions that anybody may have.
Great, thanks very much. That was very thorough. Caroline, I think you had some questions.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the paper, Joanne. I think very comprehensive as always. I've got a couple of questions. One's more of a statement, really. I'm delighted to see that Core Operating Solutions has been delayed. I think that's great news, and I will have long departed the building before the business case comes, but I wish you well with it when it does come. But I am hoping that part of that will be on the successful back delivery of cause, that there may be alignments there that could be exploited along the way. So I'll just leave it there. But yeah, just wanted to say well done for that. The second thing is on the benefits slide. Now I'll just take you to where it's on my page of the PDF. It's page 15. I think this is very useful. Page 15 and 16. It's very useful. But I think for me, what would be more useful is if we had another column which was sort of quantifiable benefits, as in cashable, non-cashable, etc. Because you've got some of them articulated there as cashable, so you can see there that you're going to save 360,000 for some. But the other one's 4.4 FTE saving. Well, that is a financial saving, and so therefore those 4.4 can either be deployed elsewhere to increase capacity of something else, or it can be reducing headcount. So I think this is just a slightly more maturing thing about benefits and how you're realising them and then what you're doing with them, and a sort of more active management of sort of benefits in terms of what's happening there. So I don't know whether that makes sense, but I think for me there's another column which articulates, because you kind of there's a sort of statement earlier in the report which says savings have been reinvested in forensics. Well, that's kind of very nice, but actually when we're under budgetary pressure, it's really important we can quantify that, and it's really important in the context of a changing operating model, etc., that we can actually quantify the benefits that we have gained from that increased capacity, etc., so you can actually see for every pound you invest, this is the return you're getting. At the moment, it's just a bit opaque for me. So yeah, so especially when you're coming back to get more money to invest, I think you have to be slightly more slick about, for every pound you give us, this is what we do with it. Or, because they're not all financial, some of them will be soft benefits. But I think just being able to articulate that, does that make sense in terms of?
Absolutely, Caroline. We do have that in our benefits tracker. We have those columns, but your expression that we're maturing around the benefits realization is very much where we're at the moment. Very looking to really embed it in the business and much more effective tracking. Well, we've got effective tracking processes in place, but we're not representing them fully in this report. So I think there's development that we could do with that report, still keeping it suitably high level, but providing that extra information. And I'll take that away and have a look at that with Fiona and Vicky for the next submission.
That's brilliant. Thanks. And if you need any help on that, please come back to me and happy to talk that through. My last question. Yeah, no problem. The last question is around the sort of PMO resource. Now, I know that's been really difficult right across Police Scotland, yourselves, etc. And I think that sort of shines through in terms of the sort of governance of big projects. You can see that time slipping and everything, and that's because I think you've had PMOs that have been off started but then been off sick, and you can then see that in terms of slippage and things going forward. So I just wondered if you'd like to comment on that, because I know that's an ongoing problem. And when you're trying to deliver change, that can be a substantial blocker, really, in terms of keeping the pace up. Because you see that all the time in terms of not just yourselves, but in terms of Police Scotland as well, projects slip. And it's that aggressive PMO function. In my world, PMOs are worth their weight in gold because they aggressively manage projects and they stick to the time and the budget and they get them over the line. And when you have a struggle around that resourcing, that can then, for me, highlights a massive risk. And so I just wondered if you'd just like to comment on that availability of resource and also any highlights of any risk you see to governance of these big projects. Thanks.
Yes, so thank you. I have to say, it's been a challenge for PMO resource across the Police Scotland change portfolio and the forensic portfolio, and we are very grateful to our colleagues in Police Scotland for their continued support. We've been challenged for sure in the PMO resource, but they're doing everything that they can to make resource available for us. We've had some additional resource injected into the change resource for forensic services by way of an additional PMO supporting the FS Cause project, which has been very helpful, and some additional business change analyst support as well. We've also developed for FS Cause a business team to support Alan. Alan Connell is the business lead for FS Cause, but we're engaging with key management roles at head of function, operation crime manager and team manager role to really help support and inform that process in recognition of what a complex process it is. Now that we've secured, I think the critical resource there was digital division and our procurement colleagues. And now that we've secured that dedicated resource, I think we're really going to get some good proper governance grip around that project as we move forward with the next replan stage, and really get some momentum on that planning piece, building on all the good work that there's been done up to date.
I was going to come back, but I wonder if Fiona wants to come in first before I come back.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline, and it certainly there have been challenges, and I've had discussions with Andrew Hendry in relation to the more strategic view across the change and transformation portfolio in Police Scotland and Forensic Services part within that. But we do have a lot of continued support from colleagues in Police Scotland in relation to what we're trying to achieve within Forensic Services. So I am very grateful, as I know Joanne has said, for that continued support. But I see we've got John, I see your hand just popped up. John Sheehy from the Police Scotland Change team here. So maybe allow him an opportunity to jump into the conversation. Thank you.
Hi, Chair. Hi, Caroline. Yeah, I mean, an acknowledged challenge, Caroline. We do have a vacancy at senior project manager level that should be working with Joanne to oversee the sort of 3 live projects and the one that's at PIR stage. I am working to do something about that. We've now got our budget settlement for this year, so I'm hopeful that I'll persuade Andrew to give me reform revenue to look at that gap. I'm actively doing that work just now. In terms of the lower level PMO activity, project support officers and portfolio management officers, we're having real difficulty all of last year and this year in recruitment. PMOs currently carrying 35% vacancies. Managed to get a new business analyst put into the team, as Joanne's just mentioned, to support the FS cause work. Sam Rice will be starting, in fact, I think she started last week. And I've managed to get 50% time from a business implementation lead to help with the absorbability assessments. But yes, low-level PMO support is going to continue to be a challenge, but I intend to get somebody in the SPM level. I'm not sure whether we'll have to recruit somebody new. I think that's likely, so therefore it will be months, not weeks, to fill that. And at programme manager level, Howard Kennett was basically filling in and doing 1 day a week. I've managed to up him to 50%. So we're trying, but I acknowledge the challenge.
Yeah, and I think that's been a very useful update there, John, and I wish you well in the recruitment. I mean, project managers, good ones, there's a premium in the market for them. And so I think the advice, though, will be the same as I've given to Andrew, which is when you're up against it in terms of that PMOs, you are far better to focus on doing less, but doing it really well and driving it over the line, than trying to do 10 things with half a day here, half a day there, a lack of the reins. Project management for me is all about holding the reins and that really accountability. Monday and Friday, where are you on the timeline? It's that check-in. Our sort of check-ins were always Monday first thing, Friday last thing, before you got your glass of wine. Where are you in the delivery of the project? And I think it's that overall reins grip on every moving aspect of complex projects that actually gets you over the line and gets you to the next thing. There's nothing worse than 5 things slipping and moving, sliding all the time. You're far better to have 1 or 2 that get over the line and then move on to the next one, because that breeds success. So that would be my only advice, because it is a challenge. And the other thing would be, again, back to that sort of recruitment strategy, is could we grow some of our own in terms of, given just the market conditions for them. So that might be something to consider as well. But thanks.
Great, thanks for that. And you're available for advice until March.
Yes, exactly. And then I'm available for hire consultancy.
There are regulations about that. Great. Anyway, thanks very much for that, Caroline. I'm gonna move the business. I'm assuming, Mary, you've got no further questions. If not, I'll move the business on.
No, nothing on this one, thank you.
Super, thanks. If we move then on to item 6, which is the business plan. And if you bear with me, I think that's Fiona again, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Chair. Thank you. So I'll do a short introduction to the paper and really the more thoughtful approach around the development of this 2-year business plan. So the last time that we presented the business plan was in 2022, and we've been reporting our performance against that in a balanced scorecard approach through the performance reporting, and Vicky took you through where we are earlier. Clearly, we have the Forensic Services Strategy published in 2021, and that sets out the strategic outcomes and objectives in relation to that. So everything that we are talking about within the business plan takes us forward and is strategically aligned in delivery of those objectives. The way that we've approached the development of this 2-year business plan is really to make sure that we've got good, strong links around the performance framework, which is new since the provision of the last business plan, having really strong alignment with risk management and risk mitigation, particularly in relation to risks outside of appetite and tolerance. The link to the Forensic Services People Plan, and also the priorities that I set out at the start of each of the calendar years. So the performance framework, if I just go back to that, we have the performance framework, which was approved in October of 2023, and as Vicky described earlier, will be refreshed in October of this year. That sets out the specific performance-related targets across a range of areas within forensic services, and the performance framework is in effect a summary of the key internal processes through which forensic services sets, delivers, monitors and reports on its priorities, and it encompasses all elements of strategy, finance, performance, people and risk management. So the business plan really focuses in on the areas where we need to make performance improvement. So it links into the performance framework. It doesn't include all in the specific detail all of the targets that are set out in that framework, because that sits as an interlinked document with the business plan. With regards to risk management, I think members are familiar with the robust and well-used approach to risk management that supports that bottom-up approach to escalation of risk within forensic services, as well as SPA Corporate and Police Scotland. So we have a good operational and strategic risk register that sets out the risks, and also in particular looks at the risks that are outside of appetite and tolerance, of which there are 7 currently on the Forensic Services operational register. So the business plan incorporates the mitigation plan for each of those risks and sets out the timescales for that. And that's an important improvement, I think, within the business planning process for this year, and we'll be able to report back to members once the business plan is approved and we start reporting against it. If there is any slippage in relation to the mitigation plans, we can understand what that means in terms of when those risks are going to return to acceptable levels. Forensic Services has a people plan, and that's in the process of just final review before it will be published. So that really sets out in a strategic context the priorities of the organisation on people-related matters, with a focus on positive cultural change across forensic services and also practical methods and processes to support our people. So the people plan sets out a range of areas where we're focused on reporting on and looking at improvement. The business plan brings out the more critical, significant projects that are captured in that people plan onto the overarching forensic services business plan. In addition, I've set out 5 key priorities for the year ahead, which I will refresh and review on an annual basis. It's important that we consider all demands on the organisation. I think this is something perhaps we have been over-ambitious on in the past in terms of focusing on too much within a 2-year business plan, and that has then made it unachievable to deliver on all aspects of the plan within the timeframes that we've set out. So really the key through discussions and workshops that we've had within forensic services is to balance all elements that I've described and to make sure that we have a revised business plan that encompasses the prioritised activity for the year ahead, that it's specific and achievable, but it does also encompass some carry forward activity from the last business plan, which relates back to the performance report shared earlier. So the appendix sets out the balanced scorecard approach. So again, we've used a balanced scorecard for this. I think that when we translate this into the performance report moving forward, we'll more clearly articulate the strategic alignment so members can see how each element of the business plan aligns to delivery of the strategic outcomes. But we have then a number of activities, 28 in total, which we've prioritised for the next 2 years, which have owners and timescales associated with them. So I'm looking for members to approve the 2-year business plan as set out in the paper, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Fiona. The only question I've got is regarding reporting. How is this going to be reported to committee over the period of implementation?
Thank you, Chair. So we currently report a RAG status against our performance against the business plan within the performance report. So I'd anticipate us doing something similar. However, I think what we can do is just be a little bit more sophisticated around the strategic alignment. So it gives members some more insight into how we're progressing towards delivering the overall aims and objectives of the strategy with the specific prioritised activities that we have in the plan. So we'll continue to report it as a balanced scorecard within the performance report so that members can see the progress that we're making against the timescale set out in the plan.
Great. Any other questions from members?
Thank you.
Caroline.
I just wanted to say, Fiona, great job. It's when I looked at the balanced scorecard, it's sort of on the money, who's delivering it, by when, not lots of photographs and guff at the front. It's just to the point, which is what a strategic plan should be. So I just wanted to say well done for that. These are the sort of plans I like.
Good. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks for that. Okay, if we've got no other questions, we're not actually asked to approve this because this is your plan. So I'm going to move us then on to the FPIG report, which is the official title is, where are we? Forensic Performance Improvement Group report. So again, I think that's you again, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. It is me presenting the paper, but I would ask my colleagues, Susie Chow from Police Scotland and also from Crown Office, Ruth McQuaid, if they would like to jump in at any stage, please feel free. So the purpose of providing this report. Sorry, Chair, did you want to come in?
Yes, Ruth unfortunately has had to depart the meeting.
Okay.
So it'll just be.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the purpose of providing this report to members was really in relation to the HMICS recommendation from the drug driving review, where we had committed to providing members of the committee with greater visibility of the discussions that were happening in the tripartite governance forum. So we have 2 of those that are relevant to this. One is the Forensic Performance Improvement Group, which this is the report from, and then beneath that is a Forensic Performance Operational Group, which deals with the more tactical matters, which can be escalated into this group for further discussion and agreement. So the report sets out a range of areas which covers off, broadly speaking, what was discussed in the last meeting. Sorry, I should say this was in the meeting before last, because the last meeting just happened at the end of last week, so there's insufficient time to include that. However, there wouldn't have been any substantial additional matters that would be added to that from the last meeting. So I hope that members can see that there is good discussion happening within this forum in relation to a range of process improvements, and in particular there was discussion around the use of electronic signatures in the last meeting, which is particularly important at allowing us to be more efficient and effective, and also the link in with the desk to make sure that we can provide our reports electronically through the desk solution when that's ready. We also look at any feedback on issues or the impact of change, both positive and negative. And we've had good discussion in relation to the introduction of the new tasking units, as well as changes in scene examination. So it's a good forum for getting feedback and having discussions across the whole of the system in relation to change. There's also detailed discussion on the performance report, which we share with members, so an opportunity for Police Scotland and the Crown Office to give feedback on the impacts of performance from forensic services on Police Scotland and the Crown. So again, a forum where there's constructive challenge from Police Scotland and the Crown in relation to areas of performance and challenge. And then finally, emerging issues, and you'll be able to see from the report the particular discussion in relation to the outsourcing spend, which Alistair presented in the drug driving report, and the potential financial risks that exist there if demand remains above that anticipated within the drug driving MOU. So the paper's provided for information and to give greater visibility of discussions that are happening within the tripartite governance structure. Susie is chaired the last meeting, so I'll perhaps hand over to Susie if there's anything that she wants to add before I open it to questions.
Thank you, Fiona. No, I think you covered that beautifully, thanks. I don't have a great deal to add. We are looking at reviewing the agenda, etc. But when our new ACC is in place, they thereafter chair the meeting, whoever that may be. But nothing else to add at this time, thank you.
Great, thanks for that. Can I ask, we've not had this up before, how often would you intend to bring us updates from the FPIG? Would annually be, or do you want more frequently?
I would expect us to provide an update to each of the Forensic Services Committee meetings, Chair. So again, this relates to the drug driving review, where there had been discussion ongoing at FPIG in relation to matters. So I think it's important that members have an opportunity to see the discussions that are happening, and particularly where there's areas of disagreement, that they are highlighted to the committee so that we can have those discussions if required.
Great, no, that's helpful. Any questions from members? Okay, just one second. Great, no, if we can note this then, and I'm going to, I think that's the last item of the substantive meeting, of the public meeting. So if I can perhaps thank everyone for their input. We've got a couple of very quick, hopefully private items. So if we can